Welcome everyone. Today I brought an interesting life story of a 21st century young pious Italic boy who did spectacular things in his very little lifespan of 15 years. Let's understand who he is. Carlo Acutis, a little boy born in London, England on 3rd May 1991 to Andrea Acutis and Antonia Salzano. Carlo was born in a wealthy family. The Acutis family had a prominent position in the Italian insurance industry, and the Salzanos ran a publishing company. And Acutis' maternal great-grandmother came from a family of landowners in New York. Even though he came from an old money family background, this young guy had always aspired to live a lowly life, often engaging in helping the poor and has a gift of empathy for others. But do you know that Carlo's parents nor his family was religious? His parents had always been busy managing their family businesses. Carlo's mother, Antonia, grew up in a secular family, but she was confirmed while she was in college and was married in the church, but she did not attend Mass before Carlo was born. It was her son's faith and his insistent questions that brought her back to the faith, and it was similar for his father. Carlo was a kind boy from birth. Since his parents were busy with their businesses, Carlo's most early life was cared for by nannies. At one instance, when he was in a daycare center, he began to be hassled by other children. Watching this, his caretaker, a Polish nanny who thought Carlo was too good and tried to teach him to set boundaries. But Carlo's response amazed me. He said to her, "Jesus would not be happy if I lost my temper." In the summer, Carlo was sent to stay with his mother's parents. After spending the day at the beach, he would join a number of older women in a local parish church to pray the rosary. When Carlo was eligible to attend his school years, his parents sent him to one of the most elite schools in Milan in 1997. Since the school was distant from their home, and 3 months later, he transferred to Marcelline Institute, a school closer to his home. During his walks to school, he took a specific interest in home caretakers he met along the way. Eventually, he learned their names and would stop by to greet them personally each morning. Starting in September 2002, he received his middle school education at the same institute and went to the Jesuit Instituto Leone High School. Carlo was an average student but liked to read and independently study areas that interested him, including computer science. He also taught himself saxophone, and he had a tutor who helped him with his homework. Carlo would follow him to church. Outside school, he would do volunteer work with the homeless and destitute. At school, he once tried to comfort his friends whose parents were undergoing divorce, and Carlo would step in and defend his disabled friends from bullies. He was such a sweet guy who loved to help, and it is said that when some of his schoolmates ridiculed him for his faith, he was never ashamed and even would defend boldly. Carlo loved soccer and video games. He tried to stay disciplined and only played games for an hour a week, even though he really wanted to play much more. On one occasion, when his grandparents gave him several games for his birthday one year, Carlo visited the Capuchin friars in Milan and donated them to children who had none. In the evenings, Carlo would ask his grandmother to make a snack for a man who begged in the park near their house. When he dropped it off, Carlo would also give the beggar some of his pocket money to buy coffee in the morning. From a very young age, Carlo seemed to have a special love for God. Carlo would never pass by a church without saying hello to Jesus. He would attend Mass and go to confession regularly. The priest promoting his cause for sainthood noted that Carlo managed to drag his relatives, his parents, to Mass every day. He had a great devotion to Mary and loved to pray the rosary. His longing to receive the Blessed Sacrament led him to receive permission to make his first Holy Communion at a younger age of 7 than customary. When he was 12 years old, he became a catechist at his parish, Santa Maria Segreta. Carlo had a unique and special devotion to Christ in the Eucharist. He was fascinated by Jesus being really present in the Eucharist. Because of this unexplainable love and longing towards Eucharist, he insisted on receiving his first Holy Communion much earlier. At 7, he would often ask his parents to take him on pilgrimages to the places of the saints and to the sites of Eucharistic miracles. His father once proposed that the family visit the Holy Land, but Carlo responded that he would rather stay in Milan. He said, "Why go to where Jesus was 2000 years ago, whereas he is here now?" While he still wanted to visit the Holy Land, He instead decided to make a pilgrimage to all the churches in Milan, since seeing as many of them were often empty. During his lifetime, he visited 17 Eucharistic miracle sites. Upon returning, he would take notes about the things he observed. In the early 2000s, when the internet was gaining popularity, having seen the need for a new way to transmit the faith to a younger generation, he had a marvelous idea of documenting Eucharistic miracles and approved Marian apparitions across the world. He bought computer programming books and taught himself programming. Those around him considered him a computer geek on account of his passion and skill with computers and internet. He was skilled in using Dreamweaver, Java, C++. When he was 14, his parish priest asked him to create a webpage for his parish, Santa Maria Segreta in Milan. After this, a priest at his high school asked him to create a website to promote volunteering, on which Carlo spent most of the summer of 2006 working. For this work, he won a national competition named Sarai Volontario. Using his research, he began creating what would eventually become a website to catalog and share the information with others. Carlo was concerned by people growing distant to the church and the sacraments and desperately wanted to bring them back. On the site, he told people that the more often we receive the Eucharist, the more we will become like Jesus, so that on this earth we will have a foretaste of heaven. He spent 4 years creating the website, which contains 187 Eucharistic miracles around the world. Carlo knew he would die young, even predicting the cause of his death and his weight at the time. His mother said, Carlo always had a sense that he couldn't waste time. He hated to be enslaved by anything he would say. Carlo had several models as guides for his life, especially Francis of Assisi, as well as Francisco and Jacinta Marto, Saint Dominic Savio, Benedict, and Mary Magdalene de Pazzi. He would often visit church alone. He would frequently pray to his guardian angel and had a special devotion to Saint Michael the Archangel. Carlo launched the website in 2004 and worked on it for 2.5 years, involving his entire family in the project. It was unveiled on October 4th, 2006 on the feast day of Saint Francis, only days before his death. Carlo was not able to attend the debut of his exhibition at Rome's church as he was hospitalized. It was also presented at his high school. On October 1, 2006, Carlo developed an inflammation in his throat. His parents brought him to a doctor who diagnosed him with parotiditis and dehydration, which a second doctor, a family friend, confirmed. A few days later, the pain became worse and there was blood in his urine. By October 8, a Sunday, Carlo was too weak to get out of bed to go to Mass. Then Carlo was brought to a clinic that specializes in blood diseases and was diagnosed with acute promyelocytic leukemia. He was given almost no chance of recovery. Then he was rushed to the intensive care unit and given a respirator mask to assist with his breathing. After a sleepless night, Carlo was transported to San Gerardo Hospital, north of Milan, one of only 3 hospitals in Italy that was equipped to treat his illness. The hospital chaplain was called in and performed the anointing of the sick. When a nurse came in to take care for him, he asked her not to wake his parents as they were already very tired and he did not want to worry them more. Carlo offered his suffering both for Pope Benedict XVI and for the Catholic Church, saying, I offer to the Lord the sufferings that I have to undergo for the Pope and for the Church. He had asked his parents to take him on pilgrimages to the sites of all the known Eucharistic miracles in the world, but his declining health prevented this from happening. The doctors treating his final illness had asked him if he was in great pain, and he responded, There are people who suffer much more than me. His final words to his mother were, Mom, don't be afraid. Since Jesus became a man, death has become the passage towards life, and we don't need to flee it. Let us prepare ourselves to experience something extraordinary in the eternal life. Carlo fell into a coma and was rushed to the intensive care unit, where he underwent a treatment to cleanse his blood. He experienced a cerebral hemorrhage and was pronounced brain dead on October 11th. Carlo died on October 12, 2006 at 6:45 p.m. He was 15 years old at the time of his death. After the mortuary cleaned his body, Carlo's parents brought his body home, where a flood of people came over the next 4 days to pay their last respects. Carlo's body had the odor of sanctity. At his funeral, a crowd of strangers attended. Many young people who had fallen away from the church returned for his funeral and then for a memorial mass 3 months later. There was a woman with a cancerous tumor at his funeral. A few days after the funeral, her doctor told her that the tumor had disappeared. Also at the funeral was a 44-year-old woman who wanted to have children but was not able to give birth. 9 months later, after the funeral, she had a child. Both women attribute their miracles to Carlo's intercession. It was Carlo's final wish to be buried in Assisi after his death. A year after his death, his body was transferred to the Assisi cemetery in accordance with his wishes. The tomb of Carlo Acutis at the Sanctuary of the Spoliation in Assisi, Italy, on April 6, 2018. His body was brought to the Sanctuary of the Spoliation so that the faithful could visit his final resting spot and venerate his body. The procession began on Friday night and ended on Saturday morning, traveling a distance of 1.5 miles. The call for him to be beatified began not long after Carlo's death. He was then named a servant of God, the first stage on the path towards sainthood. On 14 November 2019, the Vatican's Medical Council of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints expressed a positive opinion about a miracle in Brazil attributed to Carlo's intercession. Luciana Viana had taken her son Matthews, who was born with a pancreatic defect that made eating difficult, to a prayer service. Beforehand, Viana had already prayed a novena asking for the teenager Carlo's intercession. During the service, her son had asked that he should not throw up as much. Immediately following the service, Matthews told his mother that he felt healed and asked for solid food when he came home. Until then, he had been on an all-liquid diet. After a detailed investigation, Pope Francis confirmed the miracle's authenticity in a decree on 21st century 2020, leading to Carlo's beatification. Within a month of the decree, the beatification ceremony was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic in Italy, during which the country was placed on lockdown. It was rescheduled for 10th October 2020 and was held in the upper church of the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi.